back to Sunrise Steady. Well, yes, indeed, we'll be talking about the state of the nation today. We're joined now by Tunji Ariyomo, who is a policy expert and development scientist. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, taking a look at the scheme of things now, I mean, yes, yesterday, the National Council of State met. They all also talked about security. We know that they're doing what they can. They're expected security now to give us more information about the abducted schoolgirls. But from your reading and what you've seen, how do you assess all of this in terms of what's going on and how we respond to them?
Thanks so much. The security situation is quite unfortunate, but I've noticed a trend. We are looking at these issues as if they are isolated. When Chibok happened, people went haywire. This is happening, bring back our girls and so on. But Chibok is just a revelation in events that have become more or less what we could call cumulative of tragedy over time. You know, as at May this year, it's been reported that over 20,000 plus people have died as a result of this insurgency. So Chibok, as heinous as a crime is just a tiny little bit of the huge tragedy that we have before us, and I'm praying that we do not have what is more than this ahead of us, because the indices point in that direction. Starting from the beginning of this entire crisis, 2009, that was when most of us got to know about Boko Haram for the first time. Of course, they existed before that time, but that was more or less their first major announcement to this country that we exist to. And at that time, it was with sorrow, blood, and pain, deaths of so many people. So if you look at this holistically, then if we want to talk about addressing it now, we need to begin to look at what we were not doing before, what we need to do right in order to get it right. And I seriously believe that there are quite a number of things that we have been doing that seem not to take into consideration the characteristics of the era we are confronting before us and ahead of us.
Did you call them errors? So perhaps let's delve into that and see what kind of mistakes we've made in the past and see if we can actually forge ahead and get out of this mess.
Yeah. See, there is a huge difference between insurgency of this type, especially when it's terror-driven, relative to agitations by aggrieved individuals as we have witnessed. For instance, between 1967 and 1970, we had our civil war. That was majorly grievance-driven, and you could bring people onto the table to talk to you about their different differences, which happened at Aburi. And you could use common sense to solve that. That's a different ballgame. We also had the experience with our militants in the Niger Delta. In 1999, I was in the Niger Delta. We had encounters with militants, and they never touched us, even though we were more or less like foreigners. But this is different. This is chiefly about terror. And when it is about terror, the first thing that gets out of the window is reason. The second thing is it's not motivated by any equal opportunity grievance. It's more driven by a different set of rules. And that is primarily why workaround solutions like the amnesty issue that we had for the Niger Delta militants cannot work in this instance. It is the same reason that dialogue cannot work, because these people are not even those that are really, really known. As we speak today, I'm very sure there are so many splinter groups claiming to be Boko Haram. I'm sure even Boko Haram, the core Boko Haram, would not know so many of these people that are committing the atrocities, because it is more or less like a movement in that part of the country. So if we were to address this issue, in order to stop this, what I've described as cumulative error, we now need to take into consideration that special characteristics that make that distinction. One, it is ideology driven, and that is its most potent weapon. Two, it is not chiefly religious. Of course, it is using religion as a vehicle, but it is not really principally about religion. It is primarily about power. That is why I agree with the statement credited to the Sultan of Sokoto, as reported in North Africa yesterday, that this is all about politics. Yes, politics. And that is the same reason I align myself wholly with those who believe that Jonathan is a primary target. And one of the aims is to make him look incompetent, make him look out of control. And that is why you see bombing taking place in several places, targeting poor people, targeting all sorts of people, because they are not really after, let's say, the big wigs, or because it's not really grievance-driven per se. It is to showcase that this place is more or less ungovernable. So once you understand these characteristics, then you begin to look at how can we solve the problem. We are not the first to confront insurgency of this magnitude in this world. Those who have done it ahead of us have identified certain principal factors that you have to take into consideration while fighting terrorism. And that is why your strategy must be holistic. It must be very comprehensive. It must have different components, ranging from political component, technology component, economic component, even narratives. That's talking about subtle propaganda. We have to find a way to discourage this leading narrative that is propelling Boko Haram in Nigeria, that is propelling insurgency in Nigeria. We have to find alternative narrative that can take its place, because there is no room for vacuum in the minds of people.
You know, pardon me to button. I mean, if we go by what you've said, underscoring what the Sultan said, that look, this is largely politics, the fight for power.
Yeah.
It means that the general election, we have another thing coming, because remember this, so many other groups have said, okay, if that's the case, if you think you want to either bomb him or push him out of the office, we will be here to respond. It means that security agencies, in fact, we have a lot on our plates to deal with.
I agree with you. Let me add a little bit to this. When I said it is primarily about power, I wasn't restricting it to just 2015 alone. Anywhere in the world where we have had this kind of Islamic terrorism, it's all been about power. And it is not just about one election. It is not just about that. The only thing that makes this one different now is the color of the Nigerian system itself, the Nigerian state. We are chiefly divided. We are deluding ourselves to think we are one. We are not one. In fact, even though in the US you have Latinos, black, all sorts of people, they are more united than we are. And how you get to know this is that for you to thrive as a northerner in, let's say, Enugu today, you need to get your own equivalent of an international, in quote now, passport, because you need to get an ID card to identify you. And it may not be long for others to feel that, to experience that in different places.
They actually said that wasn't exactly the case.
Well, it's if we were really one, united, there may not be reason for that ab initio. So the fact that we have basis to even conceive that in the first instance is an indication of the fact that we are actually not a united people. We are so different, and there is no other place for you to realize this than even in social media. When people respond to issues, you see instances where somebody who stole 20 billion, and you immediately see people from his clan, rallying around that person.
That unity which you have said is lacking in us, even among the social media activists.
Yeah.
Is it part of what we're also going through now as a people?
Look at the military. For instance, it isn't that Boko Haram is stronger than the Nigerian military. It's impossible. I trust our boys in the military. Some of them were my friends. These guys are well trained. But what has happened is that quite a number of our own primordial sentiments, individualities, religious sentiments, ethnic sentiments have come into play and have actually led to compromising a great chunk of the military, to the extent that we now have it on record of instances and incidences where people who ought to be part of the military actually leaked critical information to insurgents, and that will give them edge over our military. So our military more or less have been fighting in the blind, where you have 7 people and maybe 2 or 3 out of you are more or less in league or sympathetic to the cause. So it makes it difficult, and that is why, rather than our military being the one terrorizing them, they are more or less terrorizing our military. It is because of that disunity. It is carried over. So when the president made a statement that these people are in my government, he was speaking the truth, the obvious truth, but quite a number of people probably misunderstood what the president was saying. He was taking into consideration the actual coloration of this country in terms of unity.
Okay. I wanted us to look now, because we really don't have much time again, the way forward.
Like I explained, fight against terror cannot just be all about military. We must introduce different components of this fight. That will include even propaganda. Take note, a former CBN governor once mentioned that one of the reasons or the principal reasons responsible for insurgencies was poverty. That is not true. We all know that is not true. Look at a state like Ebonyi, for instance, where the absolute poverty is over 70%, which is comparable to what most people in the northeast states are experiencing. Yet, you can't see youths in Ebonyi trying to destroy people for no reason. If there could be, scientifically, there is a correlation between crime and poverty, but not a correlation between terrorism and poverty. What you can say, which is not in doubt, is that once you have poverty in place, it can provide easy numbers of recruits. I will not contest that. So for us as a nation to get it right now, we need political strategy that will address, and propaganda strategy as well, that will address this narrative. And then incidences like what we had on July 7 on national television. An Islamic scholar was actually advocating for killing. It was an NTA that somebody of this nation should not exist at all, should be killed. That sort of narrative should be discouraged. The Nigerian government must find a way to make such even punitive, because when you realize that what Boko Haram is championing is majorly an interpretation, of most of these things being preached, hatred, and hateful preachings being advocated by a lot of people. And it is not only restricted to our country. Even the United Kingdom, as we speak, is, similar things are festering more or less. And in 30 years' time, we may begin to see these kind of realizations in that place, if they do not nip it in the bud. If they do not find a way to discourage people grooming kids from infancy to embrace an ideology that seek to decide other people's way of living simply because their religion says so. And that is the same reason elder statesmen like Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, recently in an interview, he stated that Nigeria is a religious state. That is not secular in the context because we're religious people. Yes, I also agree that Nigerians are religious people, but Nigeria must not be a religious state. Nigeria must be a secular state. My religion should not be imposed upon you, your way of life. That is where the dichotomy comes in. Your religion should be about yourself and about you. You should not seek to decide for other people. If a girl decides to have 4 boyfriends, it is not yours to say you want to stone her to death. No, that is taking religion out of being your personal relationship with God to now you deciding the relationship of other people who may not share your relationship. These things must be done. I will expect the Nigerian government to bring experts together to come up with draft policies that can drive this. If you preach hate, if you preach about killing people, you are a closet, in fact, you are beyond a closet Boko Haram member. You are an active one.
Because that will be some recommendation, I reckon, for them to put this on the table and actually explore all these propositions. But that's why I had to let it go this morning. Tunji Ariyomo is a policy expert and development scientist. Thank you for coming on this morning.
It's a pleasure.
We'll be back after this break. Join us again.